Stoicism is changing.
You know, I've been reading Marcus Aurelius' Meditations.
Wow.
I listened to it in the sauna. It's really intense because you're thinking these are the writings, the direct writings that we have from a guy who lived 2,000 years ago and was running Rome.
Stoicism.
Stoicism.
As someone who has covered and studied Stoicism for years now, I've noticed something strange happening. If it was just another celebrity trend, then it's whatever. But what's happening is much worse than that. This ancient philosophy that was once a guide to living a good and fulfilled life has been co-opted by the manosphere and turned into snake oil, sold as the magic pill to fame, fortune, and everything in between.
And you need to be more misogynistic. This woman just spilled my coffee.
Bitch! Bring some paper towels! We're doing a fucking podcast!
Stoicism's not feeling emotions. It's feeling the emotion and going, okay, Stoicism's stoic.
My question is, why Stoicism? Out of all the other philosophies out there, why this one? In fact, why philosophy at all? Why do a bunch of macho men who laugh in the face of intellectualism cling on to the most intellectual ideologies? To find out how Stoicism became this billion-dollar scam, we interviewed experts, took a Stoicism course, and watched more AI-generated Stoicism videos than I'd like to admit. What I found out is that the rabbit hole goes far deeper than you could ever imagine.
For example, you see a woman getting raped, for example, and you are stoic.
The purpose of Broism isn't to educate, inspire, or enlighten, but rather to trick and exploit impressionable viewers.
Men are being conditioned to be weak, and you're being told, yeah, it's good to be emotional. Young men should be emotional. They should show that if you want to become successful, masculine, if you want to make a lot of money, if you want to date or sleep with a lot of girls, being emotional is not going to help you at all. Be stoic.
With the ultimate goal of making some very questionable characters famous and filthy rich.
The Matrix has attacked me.
While on a voyage at sea in 300 BC, a wealthy trader called Zeno was shipwrecked along with all of his cargo. Instantly, this wealthy man lost all that he had. After losing everything, Zeno learned that we have very little control over what life throws at us. However, what we do have control over is how these things affect us. He realized that although he couldn't control the weather or the sea, he could turn his loss into something positive by using his experience to teach others about how to overcome difficult situations. In doing so, he created the philosophy of Stoicism. Stoicism grew quickly across all segments of Greek society and beyond. From Zeno, who many believe was a foreigner with roots in modern Lebanon, through thinkers like Epictetus, a former slave, Portia Catonis, the first female Stoic, all the way to Marcus Aurelius, a Roman emperor and a skilled and insightful writer whose personal diaries, known as Meditations, have become an entry point to the philosophy for centuries of Stoics up to the present day. In the centuries following Marcus Aurelius' death, Stoicism largely disappeared because of Christianity. As the Roman Empire made way for the Holy Roman Empire, everything in the Holy Gospel was treated as, well, gospel. And just about everything else was regarded as primitive pagan nonsense at best, and at worst the express lane to hell. All of that changed in the mid-20th century thanks to largely a handful of unrelated characters: a psychiatrist, a psychologist, and a soldier. But before we get to that, while working on this video, we dispatched 4 members of the Aperture team to explore the endless variety of Stoic tools being shared and sold across the internet. Of course, all the classic Stoic writings from Zeno through Marcus Aurelius have been in the public domain for thousands of years and are freely available with a quick Google search. Some of the other stuff, well, as you're about to see, that will cost you.
Okay, so for the next 7 days, I'll be learning everything I can about Stoicism and trying to apply it into my life using only free resources.
Alright, so this just came in. I received my Stoicism game card. It's 50 prompt cards that, contains pretty much a lot of insights and sayings from the great Stoic.
Alright, for my Stoic journey, I'm going to be talking to a Stoic coach, but not just any coach. He's just some guy that I found on Fiverr for like 30 bucks So don't expect anything crazy. I'm not expecting much from this, but hey, he's selling a service and I'm going to purchase it.
And immerse myself in some daily Stoic practices, I chose to go to the #1 Stoic superstore on the internet, Ryan Holiday's dailystoic.com. I went ahead and selected a course called Taming Your Temper, the 11-day Stoic guide to controlling anger. Every day beginning with today, I get an email, I get a video, and most importantly, I get an activity to do to try to manage and control anger in keeping with the Stoic tradition. My day one activity is something originated by Abraham Lincoln, something called burn letters. You write down some things that you carry around with you that make you angry over and over. You write them down, you fold it up, you set it on fire. And in doing so, you literally start to unburden yourself of these things that, we're carrying around for no reason. So here we go with day one.
During the Vietnam War, U.S. Admiral James Stockdale survived 7 unimaginable years as a prisoner of war in the infamous Hanoi Hilton. He was shackled and tortured. His leg, injured during his initial crash landing in enemy territory, was cruelly and repeatedly rebroken. He was paraded around and humiliated for propaganda purposes. After his release, many asked him how he was able to survive such a gruesome experience, and his answer became what is known today as the Stockdale Paradox. It goes something like this. In Admiral Stockdale's experience, prisoners of war who held out hope that a release was always just around the corner eventually grew discouraged, gave up, and died. Stockdale believed he, along with his fellow survivors, were able to endure only because they didn't hold out hope for freedom. Instead, they made peace with the life even in the most brutal and dehumanizing circumstances. Instead of waiting for the light at the end of the tunnel, they embraced the darkness within it. And not surprisingly, throughout his ordeal, he took direct inspiration from history's most famous slave turned Stoic, Epictetus. Stockdale, a Medal of Honor winner and later a vice presidential candidate, published a celebrated book entitled Courage Under Fire, testing Epictetus' doctrines in a laboratory of human behavior. And suddenly, James Stockdale became the most famous Stoic in over a millennium. Meanwhile, Stoicism was also enjoying a renaissance in the emerging world of psychotherapy. And this is Massimo Pigliucci, philosopher, biologist, and author of How to Be a Stoic.
The history of modern Stoicism really started with the invention of cognitive behavioral therapy in the 1950s and early 60s. That's because the major people that started that approach to psychotherapy, like Aaron Beck and Albert Ellis, were directly inspired by the ancient Stoics, especially Marcus Aurelius and Epictetus. So there is a connection there, and that connection is important because since cognitive behavioral therapy is arguably the best evidence-based psychotherapy available today, so in other words, it works, it also indirectly shows that Stoic techniques work.
Ellis went so far as to say that the best way to sum up the spirit of CBT was a quote from Admiral Stockdale's favorite philosopher, Epictetus. Men are disturbed not by things, but by the views which they take of them. Although giants in their field, neither Albert Ellis nor Aaron Beck were celebrity gurus by any stretch. If Instagram had existed back then, put together they wouldn't have been as popular as a single picture of Dan Bilzerian's boat. But, thanks to them, seeds had been planted that would bear unexpected fruit 40 years later.
The other thing that happened was there were already millions of people around the world who read the Meditations of Marcus Aurelius and read Seneca.
This is Donald Robertson, a cognitive behavioral psychotherapist and author of one of the most influential books on Stoicism of all time, How to Think Like a Roman Emperor.
But they didn't hang out together. They didn't talk to each other. They didn't congregate in little groups.
This is Jules Evans, a historian and author of another influential book, Philosophy for Life.
And that changed in the 1990s with the development of the internet.
The internet allowed this kind of diaspora of Stoics around the world to form online communities. And that's how it developed into a movement in a way that it was never able to before.
It was in this renaissance that Marcus Aurelius became a character in one of the most iconic movies of the last few decades, Gladiator.
Russell Crowe is really into Marcus Aurelius, and he wanted to feature more of his philosophy in the movie, but Richard Harris depicts Marcus Aurelius in the first act of that movie. There's a little kind of tantalizing glimmers of Stoic philosophy in it referenced, actually. And lots of people went out and read the Meditations after they saw that movie.
As the Spaniard was seeking gladiatorial glory on the big screen, the internet age was coming into full bloom. Silicon Valley, some formerly sleepy San Francisco suburbs, suddenly became one of the epicenters of human civilization. Society-altering innovations, email, e-commerce, everything, were emerging regularly. Vast sums of wealth were seemingly created overnight. People were interested in what made this brave new tech world tick. The Silicon Valley life philosophy is embodied by a bunch of smart people who look at everything as a system or as a machine, including themselves. For every problem in life, there is a life hack. Why read a book when you can listen to it double time? Why get a good night's sleep when you can chug a coffee, pass out for 20 minutes, and then get back to work after a refreshing and restorative nappuccino? To the Silicon Valley mindset, worrying about things like finding angel investors is a bug in the system that needlessly eats up processing power, and so to manage that, they turn to cognitive behavioral therapy, the ultimate brain hack, and its unexpected traveling companion, Stoicism.
The phenomenon of Silicon Valley CEOs jumping on the bandwagon in some ways is kind of, sometimes it's sincere, but sometimes it's this kind of superficial thing of Stoicism's trendy and I want to be a part of that. Or I like Stoicism because I saw this cool quote on the internet, which is perhaps completely fabricated and not something that an ancient Stoic ever actually said.
This Stoic revival might have just been another here today, gone tomorrow Silicon Valley fad, like hyperloops and juice machines that really just squeeze packets of juice for you, were it not for one of the major characters in our story, Ryan Holiday.
There are entrepreneurs who've done incredibly well just repackaging Stoic maxims. When I brought out my book in 2012, my publisher said, "Why don't you bring out a book of Stoic maxims?" And I said, "That sounds boring." What an idiot. I could have made lots of money doing that, and others did.
Holiday found bestseller success with his Stoicism self-help book, The Obstacle is the Way. The Obstacle is the Way was published with help from Holiday's friend, Silicon Valley angel investor and celebrity lifestyle influencer, Tim Ferriss. It's hard to imagine a more potent duo than Holiday and Ferriss for popularizing Stoicism in the mainstream. Who knows how many thousands, even millions of people have been exposed to Stoicism because of these two. Credit where credit is due, The Obstacle is the Way is a solid starter kit that has launched many readers on a path to genuine Stoicism.
I am familiar with, Ryan's work, and I know Ryan, and I've read The Obstacle is the Way, and I thought it was quite basic, but that's its strength. I mean, he pitches it at a certain level, at a certain sweet spot, which really carries. And I don't know what percentage of his millions of followers go from his work to buying Marcus Aurelius's Meditations or Epictetus's Discourses. I would think it would be very high. I mean, I wish I was as good at marketing as him.
The issue is that The Obstacle is the Way also launched an empire in which a bunch of millennia-old wisdom was now somehow for sale. That and a bunch of shiny, and some might say tacky, Stoicism swag.
Does he sell plastic skulls, or? I'm not sure.
One thing I found interesting was that before becoming a full-time promoter of Stoicism, Holiday's previous jobs had all involved helping big corporations sell stuff. His previous book was called Growth Hacker Marketing, and the one before that? Trust me, I'm lying.
Look, our job is to do anything that grows the business.
And Holiday did indeed grow his business, opening up shop through his website, dailystoic.com. Honestly, at times it's hard to tell how much of Holiday's drive comes from a sincere desire to share Stoicism with the world, and how much is just a world-class salesman making a buck.
There is a distinction to be made there between, sort of selling in general and selling and merchandising. I think merchandising is a particular type of selling. It's selling of things that you don't actually need for the exclusive purpose of making money. So to buy a medallion that has a bones and a skull that says "Memento Mori," remember you have to die. That's not useful to anybody. That's just a way to make money.
Business at the Daily Stoic is definitely booming. Ryan Holiday's net worth is estimated at between $5 and $10 million. and with that growth hacker mentality, that number's only going to keep rising. Holiday professes a sincere devotion to Stoicism, going back to his college days. And we don't doubt that he's telling the truth, but scrolling through the store at dailystoic.com, one can't help but wonder, what would Zeno think? Influencers and other online entrepreneurs took notice not only of Holiday's success, but also of how his brand was infiltrating the professional sports world. Copies of "The Obstacle is the Way" became as common in US pro locker rooms as sneakers and ice packs.
If you're, for instance, a member of a competitive sports team, sure, what people call life hacks are going to be useful. Yes, they are. But that's not Stoicism. Those are just the techniques.
Then you get these entrepreneurs who are millionaires and billionaires. And that's massive high social proof saying Stoicism is fantastic. And so that spreads out. People say, well, if this NFL quarterback is using it, that sounds good to me. So men look to very successful men and say, what makes them great? Is there anything that I could take on board?
Gwyneth Paltrow hired a kind of interior designer or something to advise her on what books to have on her bookshelf. Not to read, but what ones to have in our living room, and they recommended Stoicism because it's trending. So that's how trendy Stoicism has suddenly become.
Even the mainstream media was getting in on the act. More and more people were coming to the same conclusion. If Stoicism was good enough for pro athletes, Bill Gates, and even Hollywood actors like Michael Douglas, maybe it was the missing cheat code separating regular guys from achieving everything they wanted in life.
So we have a lot of authors now, podcasters and YouTubers and so on and so forth, who tell you things like, oh, you want to succeed at sports? Embrace Stoicism. You want to become rich? Embrace Stoicism. You want to be successful? Embrace Stoicism. The Stoics will be stunned by all of this, because all of those things I just mentioned, success, money, fame, and so on and so forth, are classified by the ancient Stoics as indifference, meaning that they do not make a difference, literally, to the only thing that matters, which is your character.
As awareness of Stoicism grew, it became even more watered down, turned into a bunch of maxims and life hacks to fix whatever life problem you had.
The so-called life hacks are techniques that are useful in order to practice Stoicism, to incorporate Stoicism as a way of life. Okay? But that's all they are. They are crutches, in a sense. They are kind of useful techniques that allows you to stay on track. But the important thing is the track, not the technique.
I mean, life hack's an odd phrase, isn't it? It's not really one that the Stoics would use. Other Stoic life hacks.
It's very accessible, it's very DIY, and that makes it kind of attractive in the age of the internet.
Somewhere along the way, the true message of this ancient Greek philosophy got drowned in the sea of life hacks. When it washed up on the other side, it was a mutant offspring, something so far removed from its origins that if Marcus Aurelius was alive today, he wouldn't even recognize it. Stoicism became Broism.
Do I remember when the manosphere started to become a thing? In all honesty, I was a kind of Johnny-come-lately. Other people were saying, are you concerned about the Stoicism being hijacked by people in the manosphere that are distorting it? And my initial reaction was, what are you talking about? I've no idea. I've never seen that. And I was surrounded by people that are interested in Stoicism. I organised and spoke at many conferences. I thought I had my finger on the pulse of how Stoicism was being appreciated, but I didn't know about the Red Pill movement and the manosphere until much later, really. Although I guess in retrospect I'd seen traces of it. So I'd seen books earlier and articles by people who portrayed Stoicism in a way that seemed quite odd to me.
It was around the time that my book Philosophy for Life and Other Dangerous Situations came out, which was in 2012. And I got contacted and invited to be on a podcast to talk about Stoicism. And I looked into the podcast, and it was a white supremacist, Southern secessionist podcast. One of the podcast hosts was actually one of the organizers of the Charlottesville White Supremacy March. And I was astounded. I was like, how did these people get into Stoicism?
Broism, in its simplest terms, is Stoicism that has been hijacked and manipulated to fit the narrative of the manosphere and red pill community. It's Stoicism for the bros. For the uninitiated, some quick background on the quote-unquote manosphere, a term, by the way, coined by a former porn star known as Ian Ironwood. The manosphere is synonymous with the red pill mentality borrowed from the Matrix movies, a mentality notably disavowed by the people who actually made the Matrix. Conceived as backlash against the general perception that feminism had gone out of control and that girls were no longer going wild in the way that real men could get behind. The manosphere, as the name implies, became a catch-all term for a network of male-centric online communities, everything from alpha males and pickup artists to involuntary celibates, aka incels, to the alt-right, the far-right, and beyond. For reasons we'll do our best to explain, Stoicism, or rather Broism, is now running rampant in the manosphere, causing a surprisingly contagious philosophical brain flu. Just listen to Taylor's call with a supposed Stoic leader.
All right, so it's been about 4 days since I purchased this Stoic course on Fiverr, but so far I'm getting ghosted and I paid like $50 for it, so yeah. So after nearly a week, my Stoic coach decided to finally respond.
You are fat. Miss Johanna, for example. There is no reason to feel sad. Why are you telling me this? People are calling me fat. Yeah, but you are fat. And I'm gonna ask you another thing, Miss Johanna. Do you wanna continue to be fat or no? No. Okay. Can you take control of your diet? Hey, it's hard, it's this, it's that. Yeah, but can you actually do it? For example, you see a woman getting raped and you are a Stoic. Like, you can pass through unfazed if you want, because that's your choice.
And although the rest of our crew didn't experience the same terrible lectures, you can tell that you really can't buy Stoic teachings.
This is my day 3 check-in. I'm doing the Ryan Holiday dailystoic.com Taming Your Temper daily guide to controlling your anger. Every day I get something to read, I get a video to watch, and I get a physical activity that I'm supposed to do. Yesterday, day 2, the instruction was to look in a mirror and make angry faces. Personally, I would say my experience looking in a mirror, mean mugging felt more silly than anything. Today on day 3, the instruction was drawing on the life lessons of the Adam Sandler movie, Happy Gilmore, was to learn to find your happy space. I would say I was expecting at this point something a little bit more substantial from Stoic content, but it's only day 3. We got 4 more days to go.
It's currently day 3, and after watching the videos on the first day, I started reading the classics. I've been reading Meditations by Marcus Aurelius, and it's honestly such an eye-opener. And the best part about it is that the book is in the public domain. You don't have to spend a penny to buy it. There are also writings from Epicure, Seneca, and even Zeno, so you can learn directly from the founding fathers of Stoicism without paying for any course or anything at all.
Alright, so it's been 3 days now, and I made it a little routine for myself. So every day I'm picking a card, reading the quotes. They're mostly from Marcus Aurelius and Seneca, which I have to say has been a very interesting way to just, take 10 minutes a day. Doesn't take too much of your time, and still a good way to change your perspective a little bit. So let's continue.
So if we had to define Broism in its pillars, so to speak, yeah, I would agree that one of them is certainly the acknowledgement that we only control our intentions and the actions that we initiate, not the outcomes. And that is, in fact, consistent with Stoicism. That's real Stoicism. That's what Epictetus says right at the beginning of his manual for a good life. And that actually is a very healthy way of thinking about things. That's also the basis of certain versions of cognitive behavioral therapy. Rational emotive behavioral therapy, for instance, studied by Albert Ellis, which is a type of CBT, starts out precisely with that kind of acknowledgement. So that's fine. But the second thing that the Broics seem to believe is that they need to suppress emotions, that they cannot afford to be seen as weak. That is not Stoicism. That is that's a fundamental distortion of Stoicism.
Too many men are being conditioned to accept weakness.
Some of my Stoic writings are used or misused in the manosphere and by the Broics, the red pill Stoics. And I've seen that, and it's like you cringe and you say, oh, I guess I should explain myself better the next time.
Unlike genuine Stoicism, Broism is rarely presented as a process for becoming your best self. Like a get-rich-quick scheme or a workout routine promising instant abs, Broism is all about results. Once unleashed in the manosphere, Broism became a one-size-fits-all answer to all questions of the alpha male variety.
But like everything, it becomes trendy, and now what you'll find is more people become interested in Stoicism because they've read articles or read podcasts than because they've actually read the Stoics. So with that, there's a risk of dilution, as many of the articles contain AI-generated content, fake quotes and things like that. So you're definitely now entering a phase where you get a lot of people becoming attracted to Stoicism, but getting a really inaccurate representation of what the Stoics said.
This is the unpredictability of how culture evolves, and memes evolve in unpredictable directions. Someone wrote a book about using Stoic techniques to win a poker championship. There was a Stoic dating app.
Let's take money. So Stoicism, in that sense, with the dollar sign or the Silicon Valley Stoicism, is a distortion because it replaces the actual Stoic value, which is your character, your judgment, with things that the Stoics themselves were very clear in saying they don't matter.
Broism invariably presents overly simple solutions to complicated questions. One of the perks of Broism is that it can be easily twisted into just about anything an opportunistic influencer wants it to be. It's an example of the Barnum effect, a psychological phenomenon in which vague and general audience appears to be tailored to a specific individual, when in reality it applies to a wide range of people. It's like horoscopes, fortune tellers, psychics. In other words, charlatans who make a living preying on people's fears and insecurities by telling them vague nonsense masqueraded as knowledgeable insights. What prompted us to make this video in the first place is that we saw a resurgence in the popularity of our Stoicism video. When I first made the video, it did really well, don't get me wrong. But in the past year or two, it's gotten way more popular than I could have thought. In fact, right now it's the most popular video on the channel with over 11 million views. The problem is that the more popular the video got, the more comments you started to see from people who seemed to know more about Broism than Stoicism. People who wanted to learn how to get rich the Stoic way, how to get over a breakup the Stoic way, how to turn off their emotions the Stoic way. And if you're watching this and you had those questions, I want you to know I'm not judging you at all for that. I've had these questions myself, especially when I was younger. The sad reality of today's world is that there's many young men who don't have a steady adult male role model in their lives. So when male influencers who have the money, the women, the power, and the luxury these young boys dream of, it's easy to see why they get drawn to them. And the message of Broism is also very attractive to these young boys. The promise that you can will yourself to become completely self-reliant, powerful, and wealthy is obviously appealing.
Because young men are often quite vulnerable and insecure about their masculinity. So they tend to look towards things that they think can fill that gap in their life. And if they think being tough and having a stiff upper lip is symbolic of masculinity, that's something that they can become quite attached to as a philosophy of life. And they associate it, rightly or wrongly, with Stoicism and Marcus Aurelius and guys like that.
Men are not into therapy culture, but they're very into Stoicism. And Stoicism is basically therapy with gladiator metaphors. Stoicism, the ethos is quite tough love. If you read Epictetus, it's quite tough love. And I think that appeals to men.
Jules Evans believes the modern world has unwittingly created an opening for Broism to move in.
I think Western culture has moved to a different kind of model, which is blame your environment. If you're feeling bad, blame your environment. Blame your economy, blame the actions of other people, blame systemic injustice of some form or other. In other words, you are right to be miserable. That's that's a very caricatured version of a certain type of left-wing argument. If you make an extreme version of that argument, you are going to leave a real opening for people on the right to just put forward this very basic idea and win followers. The very basic idea being stop blaming other people, stop behaving like a victim, stop complaining all the time. That's weakness.
In fairness, we do live in challenging times. People are looking for answers and they don't have much faith in institutions like the church or government to catch them if they fall. There's a growing sense that it's every man for himself. Some have argued that as organized religion has faded, people are looking elsewhere for a new rulebook to guide them. And just like the Bible, Broism can be whatever you want it to be. It's been widely noted that many people who believe in the divine authority of the Bible have never actually read the Bible. In the same way, many devotees of Broism are too busy scrolling through their phone to actually go read classic Stoic texts. That means manosphere influencers can claim whatever they say has roots in genuine Stoicism, and the odds are none of their followers will call BS. Although one does have to wonder, if Stoicism as it's packaged and sold in the manosphere isn't actual Stoicism, why even bother calling it that?
I think there has always been an audience for a certain kind of male self-help, which is maybe less geared towards healing and relationships and more geared towards like success and being a man of power, being a kind of great man. And that kind of genre, I think has always kind of looked for older traditional sources of advice, whether that's, samurais or whatever.
There is a widespread problem of this kind. Not only certain communities embrace anti-intellectualism and embrace certain values that are, shall we say, questionable at least, but they want to use cultural references, which is kind of ironic, considering that these communities tend to be anti-intellectual. But they feel the need to have some kind of pedigree that justifies their position. Once a tradition has established itself as respectable for whatever reasons, once it has become particularly sufficiently popular that people recognize it and they say, oh yeah, Marcus Aurelius, oh yeah, this guy or that guy, then inevitably somebody tries to co-opt it.
So if it's not the actual genuine content of the philosophy, what is it about the brand of Stoicism that makes it so sellable in the manosphere? For starters, I think we can agree that the word just sounds kind of cool. In common parlance, being Stoic means the strong, silent type. Needless to say, this image plays well to the would-be alpha males. The problem is that being Stoic and Stoicism are two very different things.
There is a difference between what sometimes we call capital S Stoicism and little s Stoicism. So when you hear somebody saying, "Oh, that person is being really Stoic," usually they don't mean he's following the philosophy of Stoicism. What they mean is, oh, he's putting a stiff upper lip. He's not reacting to the situation. He's trying to control his emotions. He's trying to sort of tough it up, basically. That is a psychological attitude, which turns out there is now fairly good empirical evidence is actually damaging. It's not a good thing. It's bad for your mental health if you try to be Stoic with a little s. Stoicism with a capital S, on the other hand, is the philosophy.
Although the term Stoicism is often misused and misinterpreted, the basic principles of capital S Stoicism are fairly easy to grasp, at least compared to other philosophies. Ancient Stoicism lends itself to easy-to-remember and highly marketable catchphrases. The phrase memento mori, a reminder of man's mortality, literally meaning remember you must die, appears to be one of Ryan Holiday's best-selling medallions. But still, why has Broism succeeded where other formerly trending philosophies, like, say, Buddhism, have not? It can't just be because people think Roman centurions look awesome and that 300 was a sick movie, can it?
So why are people in the manosphere drawn to Roman stuff? Like why? Like that? It's like that trend recently about how often do men think about the Roman Empire? That kind of trope. Is there something about it? Yeah, like, gosh, I mean, Rome was a militaristic society. It permeated Roman culture and symbolism. It was autocratic. And I think if you're going to exploit adolescent boys, which is something people have done throughout history, The go-to way of doing that is to accuse them of being unmanly and drive that message home to them and then offer to solve it for them. And then, you're going to refer to autocratic societies and strong leaders or despots.
Perhaps Broism outshines Eastern philosophies because Buddhism, Taoism, and the like have been tainted by associations with 1960s counterculture and its modern offshoot, the touchy-feely New Age movement. It's further been suggested that the chauvinism that taints so much of the red pill alt-right movements is also at play, positioning themselves in opposition to a caricature of woke liberals bowing to the exotic superiority of Eastern wisdom. Western chauvinists insist that the great forces which have civilized and elevated man uniformly originated in the West. Perhaps that has helped drive the rise of Broism? Donald Robertson disagrees.
In my own case, I immersed myself in reading Asian philosophy when I was a young guy. I read Bhagavad Gita, the Upanishads, Tao Te Ching, Wei Shang Su, like all that kind of stuff, right? And I loved it. But then when I found Stoicism, I connected with it in a different way. I don't think because I idolized Western chauvinistic value, but because I had a kind of what I would describe as a deja vu experience. I thought, some of this stuff seems kind of familiar to me. I've heard some of these concepts in our own culture.
Other observers are more skeptical.
You can see that there's also a kind of traditionalist school or kind of camp who say, like, we should go back to Western civilization's the best. We should teach like the greats. We should teach the Stoics in high school and in universities and so on. That kind of chauvinism, and you even see kind of Stoicism being taken up by white supremacists.
It definitely doesn't hinder Broism's appeal that one of the leading names in Stoicism is Marcus Aurelius. If you're going to absorb the life lessons of an ancient philosopher, might as well think like a Roman emperor, right?
Or if I'd written a book about how to think like a Roman slave, and it was about Epictetus, maybe we can test this one day, but I don't think anyone would have read it. I don't think it would have sold many copies. I think a lot of people picked up How to Think Like a Roman Emperor because they thought Roman emperors seem manly and powerful.
In reality, Marcus Aurelius was a skilled military and political leader, but between running an empire and writing his Meditations, he probably didn't have as much time to hit the gym as it sometimes appears in the manosphere. In thumbnails for videos touting the virtues of Broism, Marcus Aurelius often appears to be on some heavy-duty steroids, and come to think of it, the beard looks suspiciously modern too.
Yeah, maybe I'm guilty of a kind of bait and switch strategy here, but unapologetically, right? So we kind of rule them in because they want to be like a Roman emperor, a powerful autocratic figure. And then when they get there, they realize it's different at the top, and Marcus Aurelius wasn't particularly autocratic, because he'd seen through the illusions of power. And actually I think that's a very compelling strategy.
Clearly whoever's in charge of the algorithms on YouTube and social media knows this stuff sells. Click on a bunch of Broism links for a couple days, say, because you're researching on a documentary on the subject, and in our experience, your suggestions feed will be dead for weeks. And it's not an accident. The stuff sells. Powers that be at YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok know it, and they're all feeding in on it. So what exactly does Broism get wrong about Stoicism? For starters, calling Stoicism a Greek philosophy. That might get you some funny looks in Greece.
Well, there's kind of interesting trivia about the early history of Stoicism. Lots of things, but probably one of the main one is occasionally you'll hear people criticizing Stoicism as being a philosophy of dead, rich, white dudes or something like that, and that couldn't be further from the truth. Certainly Marcus Aurelius is a dead, rich, white dude, but he was the last famous Stoic. The founder of Stoicism was not even Greek, he was Phoenician. So the Greeks saw him as a foreign immigrant. And so Stoicism was seen as an immigrant philosophy, I believe, to begin with.
And as for the whole stiff upper lip, strong, silent type thing,
it is not the case that the ancient Stoics don't talk about their emotions. In fact, as the philosopher Martha Nussbaum said to me, no one talks about their emotions more than the Stoics in ancient philosophy. The Stoics, it's all they talk about, emotions.
Let's face it, no philosophy makes it into the mainstream without getting watered down and distorted in the process. And let's not even get started on religion, but nowadays, some online alpha male influencers have drunk so much Kool-Aid that they've convinced themselves that they're the actual experts.
I've been told, and some of my colleagues have been told several times by red pill so-called Stoics, that we don't know what we're talking about when it comes to the interpretation of the Stoic text, as opposed to people who just read one translation in English of that book and they think that they understood it. It's very interesting phenomenon psychologically, sociologically, in and of itself.
The differences between Stoicism and Broism, let's start here. To the Stoics, both ancient and modern, like Admiral Stockdale, obstacles were just that. Obstacles. Life was full of them, and to think that you could will reality to change was setting yourself up for failure and unhappiness. You needed to accept the inevitable and train yourself accordingly. In more modern parlance, you needed to learn how to be comfortable being uncomfortable. But to Ryan Holiday, to quote the title of his book, the obstacle is the way. The way to what? In the world of Broism, pretty much anything you think will make you happy. This leads us to probably one of the most dangerous elements of Broism.
The Broics have a third pillar that seems to be recurring in their writings or their discussions every time that I spend some time in those quarters, and that is a profound degree of sexism bordering on misogyny. And I don't use the word misogyny lightly. So these are frankly weird people who are into hyper-masculinity and tend to be seriously on the sexist / misogynist side of things, and so on and so forth. One can make an argument that the ancient Stoics talk in a way that we would consider sexist. Seneca and Epictetus from time to time say things like, don't behave like a woman, don't be womanly, that sort of stuff, right? And, sure, those were people who lived 2,000 years ago. They were a result of their own society, and we cringe today when we read that kind of stuff.
How did Stoicism ever get so far off the rails? On what basis does Broism justify rampant sexism, or even worse? The best explanation the manosphere can offer mostly comes down to a bad translation.
When you ask them, where the hell did you get that? Usually the answer is, the word virtue, remember I said that Stoicism is a virtue, a type of virtue ethics. Virtues are character traits, right? Things like generosity, courage, and so on and so forth. And so these people, the Broics, the red pill Stoics, say, the word virtue in Latin is vir, V-I-R, and vir also meant man, so, again, manly man. And this is baffling because vir itself was actually a translation by the Romans of the original Greek arete. Arete is genderless. It doesn't have anything to do with genders. And it just means excellence.
What does Broism get right? Not much, really. The goal of Stoicism and of life in general is eudaimonia. There's no direct translation for eudaimonia in English, but the closest equivalent might be well-being. Basically, an extended and consistent state of peace and acceptance with both the ups and downs in life. The goal of Broism is almost the complete opposite of that. It's the idea that you need a steady stream of success and external validation to feel good about where you stack up in the pecking order. The big issue isn't just that Broism gives Stoicism a bad name, it's by that misrepresenting what the philosophy actually is. The exact people who could really use Stoicism are being baited and switched and fed dangerous nonsense instead. Donald Robertson says if you squint, you can see a sliver of hope in the spread of Broism.
One thing I'd say about social media is I think, the people say dumb things, not entirely seriously sometimes. It makes it seem sometimes I think that these views are more prevalent than they actually are. Like I'm optimistic. I give people a little bit more credit than the internet. I think of Stoicism in a way as like a Trojan horse. You know, like people are attracted to it because they're looking for something that makes them even more manly than they are already, or even tougher than they are already. You know, but inside it, what they find is a bunch of tools and concepts that resemble those found in modern cognitive behavioral therapy.
Once you discover Broism and then seek to learn more, like all the new visitors in the comment sections of our Stoicism videos, hi, by the way, you start on a journey that, with any luck, can lead you to actual Stoicism. And if you think this might apply to you, then we're happy to have you, because you're the reason we made this video. If you've only encountered Stoicism as practiced in the manosphere, the truth may surprise you. And speaking of using Stoicism in our lives, let's check in with our team one last time and see how the rest of their week as practicing Stoics panned out.
All right, I just got out of my call with the Stoic coach, and like I think when we think of Broism and what Stoicism has become, I think this dude is a pretty good like representative of it in a way. Just the examples he used were bizarre. Like it was always violence against you, violence against women. As someone who like doesn't have a ton of knowledge in it, this kind of made me want to stay away because I'm like, if this is the community potentially, if this is the people running courses, then why would I want to do this? Yeah, I think overall that call was just not successful, and I had to pay like $30 for it, so not that fun.
All right, so this is day 7 today. We had a check-in with the team last week, and I was very curious to hear from my colleagues' experience with this online course, and I decided to book it for myself as well. I have to say I'm super curious to see whether or not it's gonna adapt his talking points, also because I'm a woman, so I'm gonna be paying attention to that and see if my experience is any different from my colleague, and we'll see. So I just finished my call with the Stoic course. Overall, very simplistic, nothing, no deep learning, no real human connection, like going deep into the subject. Nothing controversial, contrary to my colleague. Like he didn't go into anything completely outrageous whatsoever. So he definitely, I think, adapted to his public, which was me in that case. Yeah, just mixed feelings. I would not say that was a waste of my time, but I don't think it can provide any useful tips or life advices to people. And there are so many other resources that are actually much more interesting than that. But it was worth trying.
This is day 7, my final check-in. I've completed the Taming Your Temper course from Ryan Holiday's Daily Stoic. And overall, I would say I wasn't expecting a ton from this course, but I'm a big believer you can find some words of wisdom just about anywhere. But look, obviously Ryan Holiday knows that if people want to rigorously study real Stoicism, there's better places to do that than his website. That's not who he's pitching this at. And I'm sure he'd be the first to tell you if you have like a real anger issue, it's going to take more than a 7-day email course to fix your problems. But all in all, this felt like something, if you were going to set up a program for school children to learn some basic Stoic life lessons, this would be a good course for little kids more than grown-ups, I think. I wasn't expecting a ton, but all in all, I would have to say I was somewhat underwhelmed in general by my experience with the Taming Your Temper Daily Stoic course, especially considering it costs $50 to get all these emails.
Okay, so it's the last day of the challenge, and I honestly can say I've learned so much. Everything you need to know about Stoicism is available to learn for free. I've learned so much, and there's still so much more that I haven't even touched. We'll be leaving links to the best free Stoicism resources in the description down below.
In conclusion, the contrast between the original Stoics and the manosphere influencers claiming to be Stoics is pretty striking. Really, the difference is night and day.
The goal is to become a better person. Better person is defined as somebody who actually cares, gives a crap about other people, and does something about it as opposed to just talking about it.
And it emphasizes the idea that our character is more important ultimately in terms of the meaning of life and our quality of life than external goods like wealth and reputation.
Zeno, the founder of Stoicism, rejected the followers who urged him to give the movement he started his name. He wanted to focus on the ideas, not himself, and he rejected the pursuit of personal glory as poison for the soul. Although no doubt flattered to be acknowledged by a powerful man, Zeno is said to have declined an imperial invitation to visit Antigonus, the Greek general who succeeded Alexander the Great. It was said that Zeno avoided large social gatherings, preferring quiet study, and that he disliked verbose and elaborate speeches. Although he had known the pleasures of life as a wealthy merchant, Zeno refused to make money from teaching philosophy and instead lived a spare and ascetic life. So what would Zeno think if he could see the world today? What would his advice be for people who wanted to follow his virtuous path? They might surprise many of the people who invoke the name of the philosophy Zeno founded in their pursuit of fame and profit. Unlike many in the manosphere, he would reject far-right nationalism. After all, Stoics coined the word cosmopolitan, which literally means citizen of the world.
Stoicism is about cosmopolitanism. It's about considering every other human being on the planet as literally your sister and your brother.
We're all part of one cosmic city, the cosmopolis. We're all cosmopolitans. Therefore, we should treat people, whatever culture they're in, fairly and justly as a brother or sister.
He would fight inequality in all forms.
The one thing that Zeno and early Stoics in particular thought was toxic was this idea of becoming alienated from our fellow brothers and sisters in the human race. So racism, sexism, all these kind of prejudices and isms, really fly in the face of the fundamental goal of Stoicism, which is achieving a sense of harmony and unity among mankind.
And what of the manosphere itself? What do you think? What is the goal of Stoicism? A hint is that it probably doesn't have anything to do with girls in bikinis.
To put it more simply, it's to achieve your innate potential as a rational, self-aware, thinking being.
Zeno arrived at the principles of Stoicism when a disaster outside of his control forced him to make sense of life in a new and deeper way. He was able to do so not by rebuilding his lost wealth and recapturing his former glory, but by developing a philosophy that would allow him to be satisfied with nothing. In the same spirit, Marcus Aurelius, during his lifetime, the wealthiest man on earth, gladly parted with a substantial portion of his fortune to aid his fellow Roman citizens, saying, "The only wealth which you will keep forever is the wealth that you've given away." Other recent real-life figures provide shining examples of the value of true Stoicism amidst the worst life could ever throw at us. Not just Admiral James Stockdale, also fellow prisoner of war turned senator John McCain and Holocaust survivor turned author Primo Levi. These worthy examples of Stoicism didn't seek glory, fame, or wealth. They simply did the hard work of surviving life at its worst and coming out the other side permanently stronger. That is the way of the Stoic. And always remember, be wary of anyone who is too eager to tell you the way you should live. For in the words of Zeno himself, we have 2 ears and 1 mouth, so we should listen more than we say.